Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 2, Russell Bingley. We are honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Christophe Penot, Ambassador of France to Australia, and Monsieur Maurice Gourdeau-Montaigne, French Secretary-General of the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs, France. We also warmly welcome Mr. Richard Edwards, Executive Vice President, Lockheed Martin International, and Mr. Vince DiPietro, CEO, Lockheed Martin, Australia and New Zealand. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Victoria, St Kilda Park Primary School, St Kilda, and Sandringham Primary School, Sandringham. From Western Australia, Loretto Nedlands Primary School, Nedlands. I invite you all now to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Pilot Officer Stuart Nicholson Scott. Stuart Scott was born in Brisbane on the 12th of March 1919, the son of Charles and Edith Scott. After completing his schooling, he worked as a bank clerk in the Queensland National Bank branch at Mossman in far north Queensland. On the 21st of June 1941, at the age of 22, Scott enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force and began training as a bomb aimer. After his initial training in Australia, he left Sydney on the 16th of June 1942 for overseas service. As a part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, Scott was one of almost 27,500 RAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners and engineers who throughout the course of the war joined the Royal Australian Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. Arriving in Britain in late August 1942, Scott underwent further specialist training before being posted to number 460 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. By the time of his posting, Scott had risen through the ranks to pilot officer. Number 460 Squadron would become the most highly decorated Australian squadron in Bomber Command, and the squadron that suffered the highest casualties when flying twin-engined Vickers Wellington medium bombers and then four-engined Arvo Lancaster heavy bombers. The squadron lost over 1,000 men. Australian, British, Canadians, New Zealanders and South Africans. Almost 600 Australians from 460 Squadron are listed here on the Roll of Honour. During a bombing raid on Stettin, Germany in April 1943, the Lancaster, in which Scott was bomb aimer, was severely damaged. While over the Baltic Sea, the aircraft was repeatedly hit by fire from an armed ship. One engine was put out of action, its tail was damaged, and a shell penetrated the bomb bay, exploding among the incendiaries. Despite the severe damage, the pilot and navigator managed to get the Lancaster back to England for a safe landing, after which the pilot collapsed at his controls. Remarkably, only the navigator, Flying Officer Charles Anderson, was wounded, and he soon returned to duty with the rest of the crew. On the night of the 29th and 30th of July 1943, 24 Lancasters from number 460 Squadron were taking part in a large bombing raid as part of the Battle of Hamburg, known as Operation Gormora. The raid was part of a bombing offensive on the German city by the Royal Australian Air Force and the United States Army Air Force, which had begun on the 24th of July and lasted 8 days and 7 nights. On this occasion, Scott's Lancaster and crew were not so lucky. Shot down over Germany, the aircraft crashed in the Hamburg area, killing all on board. Stuart Scott was 24 years old. With no known grave, today Scott is commemorated upon the Air Force's memorial overlooking the River Thames at Runnymede. The memorial lists all the missing British and Commonwealth airmen. His name is listed here on the Roll of Honour on my left. Almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. You can see him standing second from the right. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Pilot Officer Stuart Nicholson Scott, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.